My name is Christy Chirinas. I am a product manager here for Managed WooCommerce hosting at Nexus. And we wanted to do a talk today about getting started online. That's been a big topic of conversation today, especially with the COVID-19 crisis. A lot of people are wondering if right now is a good time to do it, what it might look like to get started, what it might look like to reimagine the way that our businesses work. And especially for a lot of us, I think that we are settling into a reality and acceptance that this is going to go on for a little bit longer than maybe all of us expected. I don't know about you, but for me, certainly when we started seeing shutdowns all around the world in February and March, I crossed my fingers and said, I hope that this is all under control in a couple of months and that everything can go back to normal. I can go back to being outside and doing whatever it is I want to do. And I think that we're sort of seeing that this pandemic is very serious and that until we have a vaccine, it may not necessarily go back to complete normal, and vaccines take a long time to develop. So I know that for most of us, we have been listening to so much information about COVID-19 for the last however many months that it's almost like we're beating over the head with it. But we really felt that we had to talk about it, right? That in our personal conversations and our private conversations with our customers and potential customers, so many people were asking about what the competitive world of e-commerce has looked like and will look like moving forward. So we wanted to put forth this information and hopefully it'll be helpful for you and for anybody that will also find it helpful. Gasper did a really great job introducing me, but just in case, that's me. That is what I do here. So I work specifically with just our WooCommerce stores that are on the managed WooCommerce platform, which in addition to having managed hosting, managed WordPress, also includes WooCommerce support and a value-added bundle of about $5,000 a year's worth of additional themes, plugins, apps, things like that that make your WooCommerce store even more robust and create an all integrated package for selling online. So I strictly work with that small number of stores here at this company. And so I'm thinking about these issues every single day. We are getting a little bit more people in the room, so I do want to get started with a couple of questions that are going to give us a sense for who's in the room and who we're talking to, what information may be most helpful for us to focus on for you. And the first question is I just want to know, are you starting an online business? And if so, for who and when? The answer options are yes for myself in the next month, for myself in the next 6 months. So if you are an aspiring entrepreneur or you already make WooCommerce stores for somebody else, but you're also thinking about setting up some products for some recurring revenue, I would love to know if that is a plan for you so that we can tailor this more to the end consumer type information. Whereas if you're here because you're building WooCommerce stores for other people and people are coming to you saying, hey, is this the right time to start an e-commerce venture? How do I do that? What should I do? And you're looking for helpful and concise information to give those people, then we would want to know maybe more in the C or D. Cool, cool. How do I see my results, Gasper?
Sorry, I had muted myself. I was telling you the results, but it's 40% for the people who are interested, and there's 60 people who are just interested in learning. 40% is building in the next month for themselves.
Cool, cool. Okay. So a nice intense split. among two sides of the spectrum. I like it. I like it. That's very good to know. That's very good to know. Thank you. So the next question that we have for you is, since we did include information about COVID, we wanted to ask a question that's a little bit sensitive. And of course, your answer is 100% anonymous. We're not going to know. We're just trying to get a sense for who is here in the room and how to tailor the discussion that we're having to be most helpful. And the question here is, has the COVID-19 crisis affected your income? Um, your answer choices are, of course, up, down, or relatively the same. Again, 100% confidential. We are not going to see how this is affecting you, or use that information in any way. But we're trying to get that percentage split just to make sure that we understand how to discuss what is going on surrounding our environments and the current crisis.
So the results on that, Christy, were that the revenue has relatively stayed the same for 100% of the people who answered.
That's good. That's fantastic. Cool. So with that information out of the way, let's keep moving forward to really zone in on how we for ourselves start stores right now, right? And how we do that in a competitive world that is changing around us, but maybe not changing so much directly in front of us, which is an excellent place to be because we're going to talk a lot about making good decisions with a solid head on our heads, that solid head on our bodies, that helps us make the best possible choices in a world where it's easy to enter and hard to compete. So let's talk about e-commerce. First of all, I'm sure that if you're here, you know what e-commerce is, but I always like to make sure that we are level on the definition of e-commerce across the board, so that we are all talking about the same thing. So in this context, e-commerce is selling products purchased and fulfilled via the internet. So two important things there. Products are not always things. Sometimes they are digital downloads. Sometimes they are subscriptions to services. Sometimes they are memberships to sites that serve you content or deliver content on a schedule, such as paid newsletters. We would think about all of those as products. And the other thing that's really interesting is purchased and fulfilled via the internet is what we tend to think about as e-commerce. So later in the presentation, we're going to talk about some of the fast innovations that we've seen in our highly competitive world that has been rocked by the current crisis, that have expanded the fulfillment options beyond what we've come to understand as e-commerce fulfillment, right? So in the past, we've been very used to discussions about shipping, to discussions about shipping speed, and now those things have changed with things such as pickup in store, with with things such as same day delivery. And we'll talk a little bit about those and how we can take advantage of those types of situations and how to deploy those kinds of solutions for ourselves. So that is e-commerce. And the second thing that we talk about tends to be, why do it, right? So we're here and we have a nice and even split between people who want to do it and people who are just learning. So you're probably here because you already have an awesome thing that you want to get into the world. That's not always the case with e-commerce, especially today. Many of us want to get into e-commerce for the practice of building recurring revenue, and that's absolutely okay. But if you have an awesome thing you want to get into the world, we love working with merchants like this at Managed WooCommerce Hosting, because we're here to enable you to just focus on getting that incredible, unique idea into the world. A really great reason tends to be the flexibility of being self employed. Lots of people gravitate towards the idea of getting into e commerce because of the remote work possibilities, because of the scheduling flexibilities, especially right now as families get more demanding in the current situation, at least in the next year. Some of you might be here, and we tailored a good amount of this content for this because you have an existing brick and mortar store and you want to bring those products online. That can be a very different thing because existing in one geographical area is very different from making sure that those products that are doing well are also shipped safely and stand out in the marketplace of it standing next to everything else. Of course, e-commerce is growing every year. The number of people shopping online is going up. And right now, that number has gone up an additional 10% in the last 5 months. So we are looking at some numbers that are very, very serious. And we want to make sure that we are fully equipped with the information that we need to act on those changes. Some bad reasons: I spend a lot of my time talking to both existing successful and aspiring entrepreneurs, and they're exploring WooCommerce in their catalog of options for how they may get something online. I tend to tell people that it may not be the best thing to get into e-commerce if your goal is making lots of money fast. There are other ways to do that that don't involve the arduous work of driving constant and increasing traffic to an e-commerce store in a highly competitive marketplace, that tend to be lower average order volume type transactions than some other opportunities that exist in the space of remote work opportunities and flexible opportunities. Um, we also talked to a good number of people who are looking to start marketplaces. We do have a marketplace capability on our managed WooCommerce hosting product at the standard and above level. And so that is the $299 a month level or more. And we frequently have conversations about the way that, "Oh, well, I'm starting out a new marketplace," is what we get. And like, is it possible to just get the marketplace add-on on a $19 plan? And in general, we say no, because marketplaces are really difficult to run. And so an existing marketplace is usually what we want to focus on when we're looking at marketplaces. So this thing already exists in some other format, whether it is brick and mortar, whether it is on an outside marketplace, right? So a lot of people may come to us because they're looking to scale up marketplaces that are going on in an informal way, such as a social media group or things like that. Um, but in general, marketplaces are difficult to execute, difficult to maintain, expensive, and they have a hard time competing against established marketplaces. And so we tend to really steer towards a minimum viable product type concept when it comes to that. And finally, I added a note in here that just because the COVID-19 crisis is ongoing does not mean that it's a good time for e-commerce. Again, I talked to a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, and yes, the numbers are up. Yes, the number of online orders are up, but it's all happening at once and the change is not consistently up, right? Something that I remind people who are saying, "Oh, is this the time to get in?" is that it's a turbulent time, not a time of growth. So just the existence of COVID-19 may not give you the results that you're looking for because the volatility is so high. It might go really up, but it might also go really down. And making a correct assessment as to how you want to treat this, making sure you're in it for the right reasons because it's challenging and because it's rewarding. It's a really important space to be in when it comes to e-commerce. So let's talk some charts. I love charts. When we talk about why it's hard, right? I think that it's very easy for us to hear things like, "Okay, it's hard. What does that mean? What does it mean for something to be hard? Can it really be that hard?" And that's where I think that it's important for all of us to get really comfortable with analyzing what competitive landscapes look like. So Michael E. Porter, is a professor that wrote a lot of the sort of textbook content on how to look at competitions and how to academically and systematically assess whether something is hard. Right? So hard is easy to say, but what does it mean hard? He kind of broke it down. What makes something difficult to compete in versus easy? So he broke down how to understand competition at work in any kind of business world. And you frequently get this chart used in academic settings and investor services settings to get a more removed and more objective look at how competitive any space might be. So, as an e-commerce entrepreneur, someone who's looking to start your own business next month, you're an investor in you. And using this tool to assess the landscape that you're entering can be a really, really powerful thing. So, to explain to you this very conjoined triangles of success chart, what's going on here is we're looking at the factors of competition. So, competition is driven by five things. So, we have how easy is it for someone else to do what I'm doing? That's the threat of new entrants. How much bargaining power do my customers have? Can my customers look at my product and be like, well, I can get that across the street for $4 instead of $5? That's high bargaining power. Is it possible for either other competitors or other customers to easily find a replacement for the thing that I'm selling, right? So if I am looking for a very specific item, I want a beige cardigan that's 100% cotton that hits exactly at my knees, I'm going to have less options if I'm just looking for regular white t-shirts. How many suppliers and people that I rely on to do my business have strongholds over me, right? The items that we tend to think about as being important to e-commerce are things like your web hosting, are things like the plugins and themes and software that you're deploying to make sure that that's online. It's also the inputs that are going into the product you're selling, whether that is the writers that you pay for that premium content, whether that is the people who create the downloadables or the actual physical materials, the ice cream that goes on the cone. And at the center of all of these aspects of what makes something hard is just how competitive is it, right? Is it a cutthroat business? Or is it a business in which everybody kind of collaborates and there's not that many rivals? And that can drive what competition looks like. So, when we look at e-commerce, e-commerce is very wide, but one example that we can focus in on, many people who are looking to start businesses for themselves in the next month tend to be thinking about consumer products. So that's my B2C e-commerce example. Um, B2B is a little bit different, right? Your suppliers have different kinds of bargaining strengths. Your buyers in B2B are less likely to be price sensitive, right? Like corporations are more used to spending money than individuals spending their paycheck that they get every 2 weeks. When we look at B2C, we are looking at a landscape that has a lot of highs in there. When we look at bargaining power of suppliers, it's pretty high, right? They know that they can sort of negotiate up and down. When we're looking at existing rivalry, there's a lot of brands trying to sell stuff to people who are end consumers. When we look at the threat of substitute products and services, I'm sure that when you've made a purchase, whether big or small, you have seen so many options, right? You've walked into that cereal aisle and been like, there is so much cereal out there. And the threat of new entry is an interesting one because we tend to think of e-commerce as being high on the threat of new entry. And that may not seem as intuitive as maybe thinking, okay, well, it's very easy for anybody to, hold a garage sale. That's high threat of new entry. Anybody can do it. But e-commerce is approachable because it's low cost. Consider things that are very, very low threat of new entry, right? Airlines. You and I, Shannon here in the audience, and we can't text and be like, hey girl, you want to start an airline? it doesn't work like that. You need millions of dollars to do it, whereas e-commerce is not quite the case. So we actually tend to rank it pretty high on threat of new entry compared to all the other places where your money and effort can go. And this is where we start to get that big picture beyond just what would it take to build it and into what does this mean in a business sense. Now, I skipped over the bargaining power of buyers because we tend to rank the bargaining buyer power of buyers in B2C as relatively medium. We think that when consumers are shopping around, they have a lot of options, but they're not usually going to email you and say, "Hey, I love this scarf, but I'm wondering if I can get it for $15 and not 17." And so we don't necessarily think that bargaining power of buyers is too high in the B2C e-commerce industry. But with that said, it's not low because while they may not haggle with you, they may go somewhere else. So taking a look at this broken down and really explaining away the hard can be a really great way to understand how to stand out, right? Because if you understand the five problems that you're facing, then you can start to plan around them and mitigate them. You can think, well, how can I be in a business where my particular suppliers for my B2C e commerce business are not going to bargain as hard as any other anonymous amorphous business? How can I enter into a space where existing competitors are slightly more supportive or more collaborative? And that starts with asking those key business planning questions. Who's your target audience? Who am I selling to? In what way are they unique? How do I carve a target audience space for myself that allows for buyers who have options, but maybe don't have the entire world's catalog of options in front of them, who get new products presented to them through new entries frequently, but maybe not all the time or aren't looking all the time. Defining that through your target audience and then thinking about those key differentiators. So, who am I selling to for the target audience? Who am I selling to for the target audience? And then what about my product is unique? What about my strategy is something that is going to drive that value to line myself up with customers who are super loyal, whether that is through investing in a really strong brand, through providing lots of additional value with the existing purchase after the purchase point, whether that is having well developed and maintained relationships with suppliers that help look at this space of competition and make it a little bit less hard by having a laser focus on what we're doing and how we're doing it, both for the people that we sell to and the product that we're selling. That's sort of your competitive foundations. I'm going to pause for a couple of seconds and just see if there's any questions. Cool, cool. Let's move on. So let's talk about now zooming in a little bit more, right? We have this e-commerce coverage. We talk about the way in which e-commerce can be hard and competitive, some of the great reasons to start that store in the next month, some of the maybe not so great reasons that I want you to go back to the drawing board and really think about all of these factors to make sure that you're putting your money and more importantly your time and effort into something that has the highest chance of success to work, right? So sort of big picture, but then we can start zooming in on your particular picture. We have the target audience and we have the key differentiator about what might be going on. And then we have more charts. I love charts. So landscape of e-commerce, landscape of your business. The next thing that I want to look at is the scope and the source of your positioning in a highly competitive world. So you've thought about those five forces, you've thought about the target audience, thought about the key differentiator. Now you want to take that whole hypothesis and bring it through this matrix. Now, what the matrix is asking us to do is to think, how wide am I trying to compete? So am I trying to appeal to a really big audience? Am I trying to get in as many people under that net as I can, whether that is through global shipping, whether that is through having a product that has mass appeal, right? That like may be attractive or has lots of color options? Or am I scoping into something narrow? Is my idea, my product, something that really focuses on doing one thing and doing one thing well? And that's a spectrum, right? There can be wide, 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 broad, and there can be very, very, very narrow. And then there can be things in between, things that appeal to a lot of people, but not everybody. So that's one question to ask on the vertical axis of the matrix. And then on the other axis of the matrix, the horizontal, we have, where does the thing that people get excited about come from? So that tends to feel to us like a very broad question, right? Like, well, what about your product gets people excited? When we see this key differentiator, it's this very like broad, what about your product's exciting? But if we break down what makes products exciting into the most simple terms we can, usually we're excited because they're really cheap or they're really special. So I get really excited about IKEA because it's really cheap for the amount of money you're paying, right? Cheap is frequently a very relative concept. Or we get really excited about interesting new things, right? That are unique, that you can't really get a lot of substitutes for, that nobody else is quite doing like this. And this axis is also a spectrum. So a lot of the time we want to really become supporters of products that hit that point of being really special and interesting for a very fair price. And finding where in that source and how wide or broad you're trying to go with that is how we start to identify in which direction you're pulling and what strategy you're going to implement. Because we have this matrix and then it has four spaces based on your answers to those two questions. And when we have broad scope, low cost, we have cost leadership. Your thing is you are super affordable. Your marketing, your website, your product pages should all focus in on this is the best value for your dollar. We are appealing to as many people as possible. We're going after the big, big net, and we're doing it by being really, really affordable. Now, when we talk about affordability with small, narrow scope, we're talking about things that are very specific to one audience. So a really amazing example is Dollar Shave Club, right? All they do is sell razors. Now they sell other stuff now. They'll also sell you shaving cream. They'll sell you whatever. But their thing, the name, the logo, the marketing is all about the shaving subscriptions. They are cheap and it's one thing in your life out of the many, many things that you need to look and feel great and whatever it might be. And so that is competing on cost still. Your source of that exciting thing is cost, but you're doing really, really narrow scope. So suppose to something like Walmart or Costco or things like that that are very, very large and compete on cost. Now, the thing about competing on cost is that it's really hard. Competing on cost means that you usually have very, very seasoned supply chain managers and just brilliant things going on to deliver that value with teeny tiny thin margins, or most of the time both. You have access to both a competitive supplier so you can get the things you're selling for cheap for some way in some way, and then in addition to that you're implementing very, very good supply chain management. So a lot of the time for those of us that are 1 to 7 people competing in the e-commerce space, we are going to use differentiation as our source. So we're selling something special. And when we sell something special to a large group of people, you can think of something like Apple. You can think of something like Nike. You can think of something that has made a massive investment in their brand, where the people who love these brands, they'll pay anything for it. You can think about Supreme, that weird clothing brand that sells you like $1,000 t shirts. That's your differentiation for broad. It casts the net wide, but it strictly stands out in being special and being that if you want a MacBook Pro, there's not really something else that you can go out and get that's close enough. It might be a knockoff MacBook Pro, but it's not a Mac Pro. There's substitutions. You can get a laptop, but it's not the MacBook Pro. That's your differentiation source. And then we have this very interesting space, which is what we're going to focus on today, which is the differentiation focus. So when we look at WooCommerce stores, most of the time we're looking at new stores, growing stores that are doing one thing really, really well, and they're doing it for a small group of people. And that one thing for a small group of people is taking them all the way to the bank. Before COVID and after COVID will be a great time to find a space for differentiation focus. I don't know how many of you have heard of Bridge, but they are a company that specifically makes very unique, expensive, well constructed accessories for Apple products. So maybe you know about them. If you know about them, you're probably like, oh, I know that. I know that company. And the rest of you are just like, doesn't matter, right? So extremes, right? I think the other examples you were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But then that's differentiation focus. You get super fans, and those super fans go on to tell other super fans, and maybe the rest of the world doesn't pay all of the attention. And that's okay, right? So they sell these $150 keyboards for your iPad, and they sell these $100 carrying cases. And the people who like their products are on their mailing list. They're on wait lists for the next new release. They watch the product videos. They watch YouTubers that show unboxing of the cool new Bridge keyboard. And a lot of the time when we are individuals that are getting into the e-commerce space, we are going after that and we're putting our effort into appealing to those people. And that's a really interesting thing and mindset because you're applying your limited resources towards what's going to work. If you know that you're sitting in the space of differentiation focus and not differentiation, you might make less choices that obsess about what your logo looks like and more choices about how do I get YouTubers to talk about this product. So for the next couple of slides, I want to show you three stores that I love that are running WooCommerce, and that while I'll talk about the way in which their scope and source is different, for the most part, they're existing in differentiation focus. And I hope that this serves as inspiration to see what is possible, both with WooCommerce and both with an interesting strategy and a compelling product that serves a very specific need. Love these guys. The Rudis.com. Rudis? They sell wrestling shoes. The tagline is wrestling gear, the most authentic expression of wrestling. These shoes are so cool. They have a cool logo on them. They have wrestling influencers that I've never heard of because I don't know wrestling talk about these cool shoes. They do these amazing launches where when this new shoe is coming out, they have a celebrity in the wrestling world collaborate with the launch, and their website has to maintain all this traffic. These guys are existing strictly in the space of differentiation focus. Why are they doing that? There's something special about these shoes. There's many, many, many different wrestling shoes out there, but if you want these ones, then there's not really an other easy alternative if you want these ones. If you get influencers in this very niche industry to talk about the types of shoes that they like and they say those are the ones to get, the people who follow that niche influencer are going to also say, well, I really like this person. I feel very connected to this influencer. This is something that I want to stick to. And it's narrow, right? Unless you're a wrestler or someone who looks at WooCommerce stores for fun, you probably have never heard of them, and yet they're doing very well in the space of wrestling shoes. This is an interesting other WooCommerce store. Now this one we'll get into because it's a water filtration system. So they come to your house, and the WooCommerce store itself is very, very interesting because it integrates in-person scheduling into the checkout process. So you get all the information about this very high-end water appliance. And then in addition to that, the e-commerce system itself must accept your payment and then also help you get set up with an installation. So it's cool on a technology stack and perspective. But in addition to that, we're still talking about differentiation. There's a small group of people that's going to want premium filtration in their house. The people who do will pay a lot of money for it. I think that these guys are so fun. This is another WooCommerce store. You should totally check it out. They're called the brobox.net, and it is awesome gifts for the men in your life. So you can buy a subscription box of just cool things that the men in your life might like. The gifts vary from all sorts of things like nice whiskeys, interesting snacks. You can pick by interest, things like that, and they send them in different subscription tiers. So we'll do something like, oh, you can send them one box, you can send them 3 boxes over 3 months. You can customize your own box and send them that. So there's lots of functionality and creativity going on here. And what's interesting about this, right, is that it is differentiation focused, but I do think that while it is focusing on being something kind of special, what it's really doing is it's curating. It's saving you time, and it's doing so for a very specific application. Do you have one man in your life who would enjoy these traditionally masculine gifts curated by other traditionally masculine curators and selected by hand, packaged, delivered in a very compelling way? To me, that's cost. So it's really narrow, right? We're not doing wide gift boxes for everybody, but we are creating high amounts of value for a marginal amount of additional cost on top of what the actual products themselves cost. That means that we have to tightly manage that supply chain, tightly manage how we're picking out the gifts and how we're curating them, and get them all out the door on a subscription model. It's an interesting way to think about it. And if you check out that site, you'll see that it's a little bit different than the water filtration business or the wrestling shoe business, because many less pages are focused on extreme zooms of the product, of Q&As, of videos, and instead we're focused on all different ways that you can customize creative and quickly delivered gifts for the special bro in your life. Some key takeaways from those 3 examples. One is you'll notice that I didn't give you any sort of low cost, broad scope examples because we are not going to find those on most WooCommerce stores or most uh, people who are looking to start an e-commerce business in the next month. Going low cost e-commerce is of course possible, but takes a good amount of resources. And some of us here attending this webinar may not necessarily have those. I don't know, you might have a billionaire uncle, but I do not. And so I most likely would not start a business that would lean into coast leadership as its competitive strategy. So the flip side of that is that most e-commerce businesses will succeed by finding a very specific niche and fulfilling their needs really well. Now, this is only a couple of slides. We have 5 slides. I want to take you quickly through, after we think about competitive strategy, what tools are out there and strategies are out there right now. Of course, we are talking about WooCommerce. I work on this managed WooCommerce hosting platform here at Nexus by Liquid Web. And something that I always drill into everyone's head is if you build it, that does not mean they will come. Thinking about how to boost up The traffic that comes to your new store is the most important thing that you can be doing way before you think about customization of burrow boxes or before you think about 360-degree see in your room type features. We want to think about traffic. And while every business, depending on what kind of competitive strategy you're taking on, will have different ways to stand out in that competitive landscape, there's some stuff that work pretty well for everyone. One, you pay for traffic. Two, affiliate programs. If you can get one person really excited about your product and then motivate them with money and free stuff to tell somebody else about your product, that's a great way to get off the ground and get from 0 to 10 and from 10 to 100. Syndicate your products. A great way for anybody to get started is to have things on a WooCommerce store and then also have them listed on major marketplaces and exchanges, and maybe even incentivize coming to your full site, whether with a discount or with additional free stuff. Content, content, content. Everybody says to focus on content. Focus on content. Do it all the time and do it quickly and not too seriously. Above all, find a channel that works best at the beginning to get from that 0 to 10 and then 10 to 100. It's all about trying things out quickly and seeing if they made a big dent and then moving on to the next thing until you find 3 to 5 things that make really big dents and then keep doing those. Something else that is frequent is that when you're looking at e-commerce, you always want to optimize for the thing that you want, which is money. Many of us who are building WooCommerce stores are coming in from a WordPress context, and so we tend to think of things like traffic and of things like clicks and of things like long times looking at the page and long times scrolling as ideal conversions. And while those can be excellent indicators of other aspects going on the content sides of your website, at the end of the day, you want sales, optimize for sales. Other things that we know work. Social proof on pages consistently shows itself to be something that works. Our psychology likes to know that other people are doing the thing that we're doing. For longer term products, for example, premium water filtration systems, plans to nurture do work. Many products have purchase cycles that are longer. And what that means is that from the point at which you hear about it to the point at which you make the purchase, it can be something like several months, maybe even a couple of years. And making sure that you stay top of mind when the person is ready for the purchase is really important. We know that videos work. Having something explained by a video is, if a picture is 1,000 words, then video is like a ton of other pictures. We know that walling off checkout decreases conversions consistently every time. Offer guest checkout if you can. It's quite easy with WooCommerce. And we know that free shipping consistently increases those purchases across the board. So, if at all possible, figure out how to loop in the cost of transportation and fulfillment into the cost of your products. Last but most certainly not least, because we're talking about free shipping, now we're seeing a significant trend for buy online, pick up in store. I love this acronym. It's BOPIS. And BOPIS is an acceleration of the fulfillment process that has taken it partially offline. So your store owners can configure local pickup options. Now we have that in shipping zones. That is a quick adjustment that we have available to us due to the pandemic. Most importantly, what really matters is we are willing to drive a way out, especially for low cost items right now, to keep ourselves and our physicality safe. So don't overthink it, make it available, make it safe, and other than that, it doesn't have to be super shiny. It's going to be okay. You're going to be surprised at the way in which consumers right now are willing to engage in buy online, pick up in store. To do it, it does exist in the shipping zones. You can just go to WooCommerce settings, shipping zones, where you would set the settings like free shipping and the other things that I mentioned to be consistently successful ways to increase the number of conversions on the site. So that's it. That's me. I'm Christy Charias. I'm the product manager here at Managed WooCommerce Hosting. I spend all of every single day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, thinking about how to make WooCommerce merchants more money. And so I'm widely available. If you're on Twitter, I'm also on Twitter. You can send me questions. My DMs are open. I answer questions and send resources to people all the time. If you want to see what we have offering at Managed WooCommerce hosting within Nexus, you can go to nexus.net/WooCommerce. And I didn't include it on here, but we also just launched a WooCommerce Resource Center on the Nexus website. It used to be on liquidweb.com that has all kinds of information about everything that I just talked about here, including how to set up social proof, how to set up that free shipping, how to use WooCommerce for guest checkout, how to optimize for conversions, how to integrate Google Tag Manager with WooCommerce. So that is a huge wealth of resource, and I hope you find it useful. Again, if you have a hard time finding it, just let me know. I'm widely available. You're muted.
This mute button's going to kill me. That's if there's one
It
thing
gets me
I've
too.
learned from COVID, it's that you need to unmute. But no, thank you for that information. It was a lot of great information. I really like the examples that you showed us. I thought those were some really great examples. I'll probably be visiting Brobox later today for some gifts for brother-in-law of mine.
It's such a cool store.
It really sounds fantastic. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. We did get a couple of them. Sadie asked if you're already too busy running. Let me put this in Sadie's terms in her actual question. I'm already too busy running my business. How many hours will I need to dedicate to my online store? What do you think, Christy? How many hours do you think somebody from a brick and mortar or physical store to an online store? What's the split there? Like, does somebody? Because it does turn into be a pretty big undertaking, especially getting a site up and running. Do you have any advice for them for that?
So it's difficult for me to give you super actionable advice without having more detail, right? But I can speak in broad strokes, and if you want to specify, I would love to have that conversation. In general, um, if you have the margins provided, I would say that you want to outsource as much of that as possible. When it comes to WooCommerce, WooCommerce is very much one of those things that just because you can do it yourself does not mean you have to. There are wide directories both in the WooCommerce website and the Nexus website of WooCommerce providers that can help you stand up a store and do a lot of the legwork, at least from the beginning, to just get you online because there's a handful of buckets of high amounts of detailed work that go into going from you're already super busy with brick and mortar and you want to get it fully online. And those are going to be the actual website and the implementation of these features, the clicking around through the stuff I talked about to go into the settings, to set up the free shipping, to set up the guest checkout. And then you have your product photography is really, really important to success with your WooCommerce store. And then you have the driving traffic. So if your margins allow, I would deeply encourage you to look at the WooCommerce provider directory and the Nexus provider directory. You can also look at Codable.io and get that part of it off your hands because you want to focus on the product photography aspect of it, which is going to potentially be even more important if you're running a brick and mortar store already. It's easy to get started with product photography, but it's not simple and it's not low stakes. And then, more importantly, I would focus on making sure that you have a strategy in place for driving that set of traffic, right? Now, if you have a brick and mortar store, a lot of your initial traffic will be driven through your brick and mortar store. It'll be driven through business cards, it'll be driven through actual physical materials that indicate to people, hey, you can get this and more online. Hey, you can send this to a friend and they can get something online. But if that's at all approachable, I would encourage that. I'll speak into other broad strokes, which is let's assume it's not. Let's assume that you're running a brick and mortar business and it's going to be on you to set up this WooCommerce store. I would encourage you to take it one step at a time. Thinking about setting up everything that you have going on your brick and mortar store all in one time when you're DIYing it all yourself is not an easy endeavor because you're probably looking at, you know, 5 to 10 hours, that's generous, of your week looking at what's going on in that store. And if you're already busy managing a brick and mortar store, that may quickly get unrealistic. So if you are DIYing it, I would think about it in terms of incremental steps. What are the things that are super successful in your brick and mortar
Mhm.
store? What are the things that people keep coming back for? And can you get started on a creator plan on managed commerce hosting that already has everything and use the store builder feature to just stand up a simple page and put that one thing online so that when people say, oh my God, I love this thing, you can say, oh, did you know that that one thing that's super popular you keep coming back for, you can now put on subscription online. People love that. You have more predictability in your revenue. And then the most important psychological thing is you can say to yourself, okay, so the e-commerce channel is making X number of dollars every month. So let me figure out how to skim off of that and do what I said, which is go to the WooCommerce provider directory, go to Codable.io, and get them to stand up the rest of it.
Yeah, I would just real quick add, if you are looking to get your store set up and you don't feel like you have the time, we do have channel partners, agency partners that we work with, all the time. We have a partner team that can help reach out to any of them for you. Built Mighty, Absolute Web, Crimson Agility, just to name a few of our good partners that can help set anything up. Another question came in from Kate, asking, so it looks to be looking at other platforms. You mentioned Spotify. Why choose WooCommerce or Shopify? Not if I can read
I
right.
do that all the time.
Yeah, why choose WooCommerce over other platforms?
So here's where WooCommerce shines, and we're publishing on the WooCommerce Resource Center and the Nexus blog a very detailed outline of this. WooCommerce is super flexible. It's so customizable and it's low barrier to entry, right? So for what you're getting, it's low barrier to entry. I showed you these three examples of stores that are on WooCommerce that I think are really exciting e-commerce plays, and you'll see that the thing that was in common among all three of them is that they were all doing something kind of different, right? The wrestling shoes, they're working with a ton of influencers and they feature people on their website and they have all this video and they have all this stuff going on surrounding the wrestling community that requires customization and that they don't want to have to maintain all kinds of custom code for. The water filtration store tends to schedule in-person installations that are related to the e-commerce orders. So that customization using something like Shopify can be a pretty expensive mix of apps and you might have to bend your business model into making sure that you can do it however the app decides that you need to be able to do it. Whereas if you're using WooCommerce, you're bringing together open source software and then that opens up the possibilities. The BroBox website has so many different options. You can get small Bro boxes, you can get large Bro boxes, you can get custom Bro boxes with different kinds of interesting products that you want. You can just get one thing repeated that you loved in your previous Bro box. And that's the space where WooCommerce really, really shines.
Can we just real quick mention how great of a brand Brovox name is? It just rolls off the tongue so easily. I love that brand. It's a fantastic brand.
Yeah.
But so that being said, so how does somebody get started with managed WooCommerce? What is the next step like to get started in managed WooCommerce?
Sure. So with managed WooCommerce hosting at Nexus, we offer a 14-day free trial that you can sign up for the $19 a month starter plan. So That's available on the website. There's no credit card required. You put in your email address and then you're immediately thrown into our Nexus portal, which will give you access to the WooCommerce and WordPress dashboards as well. And you can start playing around. If you have never touched WooCommerce before, we have one really awesome resource called WP 101, which has a WooCommerce resource center that can show you how does it all work, how do I click around. But the thing about WordPress and WooCommerce is that WordPress powers a third of the top traffic sites online right now. And the reason that that is the case is because it's not super impossible to figure out by just clicking around. So putting aside some time on a night or a Saturday day when you'd otherwise be watching Selling Sunset like I did all weekend, it's an amazing show. It's so terrible. Clicking around and figuring out how do I put up products? How do I set up these shipping rules? How do I set up these tax rules? You'll find that the vast majority of it is like any other web application you're already used to looking at. The buttons, the forms, the text boxes, the inputs. All you have to do is set up the store.
Awesome, awesome. Great, another great question here by Patrick. These are really good questions, you guys. Keep them coming. But um, uh, what laws and regulations should you be aware of prior to setting up an online store? What is it that they should be looking for there?
So I can speak to the United States. I am not fully sure about overseas laws and regulations. I can do some research if you send me the specific question. Again, I'm wide open on social media and on our website and things like that. But I can speak to the United States. So in the United States, the first thing you want to know is that each individual state is going to have different uh, sales tax rules on goods. So to start out, things like downloadables, things like subscriptions are considered services. And there are some states that will tax those and some states that will not. Goods across the board require sales tax. Now, what you have to do in terms of that is there is most of the time, a compliance questionnaire that you must take as an LLC owner that will ask you questions about what you're doing. And this is the same questionnaire that asks you things like, are you selling tobacco and firearms? Do you have any employees who we need to charge unemployment insurance? It will also ask about the goods and services that you're providing. Provided that you've determined that your items are goods and not services, then you would answer yes, and then that will complete your registration into getting this unique number about the amount of sales tax that you need to be charging to your customers and the amount of sales tax that you need to pay quarterly to the state regulation in the place where you are. Then within WooCommerce, you can set up the information. So you'll get a letter, right, from the state government that says this is the state tax rate that you're supposed to be charging. You put in the number and you pay in the same way that you pay your unemployment taxes. I have been a business owner and I can tell you that I just explained all of this and I never wanted to do any of it. It's terrible. It's awful and it's hard to keep track of. And they send you snail mail and who checks their snail mail? And so there are many services online that will just handle all of this for you. So you'll register your LLC and you'll register as somebody who needs to be charging sales tax, and then you'll get an identification number for both your business and for your sales tax account, and then you'll put it into this service such as TaxJar. And then they will make all the payments for you and they will integrate with WooCommerce to make sure that your rates are all set correctly. Many businesses have to be registered in multiple different states. And so a service like that will manage those kinds of aspects for you, depending on where you're charging sales tax to, where the item is coming from, where the item is ending up. And integrating one of these services with WooCommerce is an excellent and totally worth it pain-free way to make sure that all of that is managed for you. You can do it manually, but the amount of time that you'll save by outsourcing that is totally worth it.
Awesome, great information. It looks like that's all the questions we have. If you guys have any more, feel free to drop them in. We'll wait one more minute here. But just to reiterate, if anybody is looking to get started right away, nexus.net/WooCommerce. You can hit that free trial button, get started right away. Christy, I believe you said no credit card, right? So no credit card needed.
No
Go
credit card
ahead,
needed.
jump in, start fooling around with WooCommerce. Christy, thanks again for all the information. Appreciate your time today. It's been great. We will be sending this out as a recording, so if you want to share it with anyone, look for that in your emails. If you have any questions, any follow-up, you're watching this later on, you're like, oh man, I got this great thing I need to ask. Feel free to hit us up. I don't know, maybe some people do that. If you do that, go ahead. But feel free, connect with us. You can hit us up on social. You can send us a message. Christy, thanks again. You can reach out to her through DM on Twitter. But I want to say thanks for everyone for joining us, and we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.